Hey again, this is part 2 of our conversation about the repay cycle. I'm your host, Allison Lee. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the last episode and that it was beneficial to hear me talk through how it could play out. And of course, everything is so different within each specific family and each individual. But generally, these are the themes that I see and patterns that a lot of my clients and, just what I've experienced. I hope that going through the repay cycle was helpful in explaining how it can play out and have you reflect a little bit on what that might look like for you, because your version might be a little bit different, but how does it fit into the cycle? And again, the 4 phases that we go through in the repay cycle is awareness, repay, self-sacrifice, mixed emotions, and then we go back again to the awareness and go through the cycle of this throughout our life. This was really eye-opening for me to lay it out and help people see where they are at and notice where they could, implement different things to put a pause or lessen the intensity of being in these phases. But that would be for part 3. And for this episode, I wanted to talk to you about why it's actually important to really think about this. If we don't know why we're doing something, if it becomes so much of a habit that it's just instinctual, right? Everyone asks us for something, we're always like, sure, yes. Or maybe not everyone, right? Maybe it's just our family members who ask us for things. It can start to take a toll on you as an individual, as a person, as a caregiver, as an emotional support person, as a friend, as a child, as a parentified child. So, that leads me to another point of parentification. When we are parentified, we are asked to engage in roles that are above our developmental stages, right? For example, if I was in elementary school and I was asked to translate, my report card or why I got in trouble at school, that's not something I should be doing. That's above my developmental stage. That should not be my responsibility. Another example could be if a young child is asked to caretake for their younger siblings. And of course, there's a varying range of what that could look like that's appropriate or not appropriate, depending on personality, depending on age. But generally speaking, let's go to an extreme of if a young child is asked to take care of a younger sibling for like 5 hours, right? That is not developmentally appropriate for their age. So they're parentified. They're put in a role that is exceeding their responsibility at their developmental age, right? And people can do it, but that doesn't mean that it's beneficial for the young child to be doing that. So I went off on a tangent about parentification, but it's very important. This happens a lot to adults with immigrant parents as a young child, and some of the characteristics, stay with us as we get older. So there definitely will be an episode about this coming up. So subscribe if you hadn't already so that you will get all the new episodes updated and sent directly to your phone. But going back to what I said, so if we don't know why we're doing certain things or where it's coming from, it's easy to get lost in the mix. And something that really happens too with adults with immigrant parents is that we are at least at minimum caught in 2 worlds. For me, I'm in the US, so the American culture, the American world, and our parents' culture and their parents' world, or where they came from and what they know, what they like, and all of that. So we're constantly in the middle, constantly trying to balance, well, do I want this? Do I want that? My parents want this from me, but this seems cool. What do I want? And it's kind of hard to figure out. And sometimes for adults with immigrant parents, the obligations, the expectations, the desire to help and the desire to improve their situations could lead them to a path of where, we're going to follow what people tell us. Also, we're going to probably follow what our parents tell us, generally speaking, because they're kind of like our role model. So there could be a heavier lean towards doing things that our parents want and all of that, but we're constantly being pulled by what's available in our culture, where we're living, what we're growing up with, and things like that, right? For example, I remember, watching TV, and I would see parents would talk to their kids about things they're going through and in detail and talk about their emotions. They could lash out and they'll talk about it later, and I'll be like, what is this? How come I don't have that, right? I mean, I had it in different ways, but not in that way that I saw on TV. Not in it, I'm not saying my parents weren't supportive or cared for me emotionally, but it's just different. And then we're, longing for Thanksgiving dinners or whatever it is, because it's like, well, why don't we celebrate Thanksgiving? But we had other holidays that I just didn't see in mainstream media to kind of normalize that for me. So yeah, even just that, right? It's just like constantly being pulled. Why is this happening? Why is this not happening? Do I want this? Do I want that? It's hard to know as a young child. And then even as an adult right now, sometimes I'm like a little bit, I don't know if confused, but I feel bad about like not celebrating more of the traditions my parents do, but I also don't really know how to or understand it in the way that my parents do, and sometimes just not getting information from them about how to actually do the things discourages me from doing it. But anyway, that's a side tangent, and it's not an excuse, but it just kind of makes it harder to comprehend, and maybe my need for understanding is stopping me from just doing the thing. Anyway, I don't know if you feel this way, but a lot of people I talk to do feel somewhat bad that they aren't celebrating the holidays and the events that their parents celebrated for them with their kids or as an adult now. But I digress. Going back to the repay cycle and why it's important to know about this is to distinguish what your values are, what your families are, versus what are common themes that you have together, right? Because when we aren't clear on, is this something I also want? The resentment, the obligation, the irritability might kick up a little bit more, right? The example that I gave in the last episode was if like someone wanted to actually be a doctor. They really enjoy medicine. The medical stuff's really cool, but because their parents kept telling them like, hey, you should be a doctor, they're like, I don't want to do it, right? Or they do it begrudgingly even though they enjoy it, because in their mind there's this like floating pressure of like, I have to do this for my family because that's what they expect of me. So that sucks the joy out of it a little bit potentially, right? But if we find that, hey, I want to be a doctor and my family also wants me to be a doctor, and the overlap is there, it's just the way it was executed or the way that it was presented, expected, wasn't what we wanted, then what do we do about that, right? Do we want to, change how we think about this? And this is why in my Unshaken Confidence programs, I really talk a lot about reprogramming our minds, changing our thoughts, because it is really, really important. We don't want to have old beliefs that are no longer relevant to us hold us back. So being able to be aware of what those thoughts are to begin with is how we start to make the change and start to know more confidently what we like, what we don't like. That way we can know what we want to do while recognizing what other people are expecting of us, what we want to do, and is there a compromise that I'm willing to have. So I have a Venn diagram. In the show notes, you can click on it. It's also on my website at heyalisonlee.com/podcast, and you can check that out just to visually see, even print it out and see what are my values, what's overlapping, what's my family values, so that we really get a clear picture of who you are, what you value. And I'll also send you a list of values if you want that, so that you can start looking at like what's important to you, so then we can talk about potential ways that you could start to lessen the intensity of being in the repay cycle, and or just move through it a little smoother and take care of yourself a little bit more, or repay in a way that actually works better for who you are now and what you want to include in your life at this moment in time. All right, so I will catch you in the next episode. Hey, thanks for listening to the show. I appreciate you being here. Just as a reminder, all information on this is intended to be informational and educational only. Although I am a licensed therapist, I am not your therapist. If you are looking for any medical or mental health services, please reach out to providers local to your area and seek out information that is specific for you. This information is not intended to replace any medical or mental health services that you may benefit from. And I hope that you enjoyed the information that was provided on the show today, and I'll see you on the next episode.